The old Victorian house stood on a hill overlooking the town. Its once grand facade now showed signs of age, with ivy creeping up the walls and windows that had long lost their shine. The house had an air of mystery, as if it held countless stories within its walls. Eleanor, a young woman with a passion for bygone eras, browsed the estate sale. She'd always been drawn to the charm of the past, finding beauty in the worn and weathered. The estate sale was a treasure trove for her, each item a potential link to a forgotten story. She loved finding hidden treasures, objects imbued with stories of the past. Each piece she touched seemed to whisper secrets of its previous owners, tales of love, loss, and life lived long ago. Eleanor felt a connection to these items, as if they were waiting for her to uncover their histories. Amongst the dusty furniture and forgotten trinkets, a leather-bound book caught her eye. It was nestled between a tarnished silver candlestick and a porcelain doll with a cracked face, almost as if it was hiding in plain sight. It lay on a table piled high with forgotten things. The book's cover was worn, the leather cracked and faded, but it had an undeniable allure. It seemed to call out to her, begging to be opened and explored. Eleanor picked it up, its weight surprising. It was heavier than it looked, as if it was filled with more than just pages. She wondered what secrets it held, what stories were waiting to be discovered within its covers. The leather was cold and slightly damp under her fingers. It felt as though it had been untouched for years, waiting for someone to come along and breathe new life into it. The texture was rough, yet comforting, like an old friend. She opened the book. The musty scent of old paper filled her nose. It was a smell she loved, one that reminded her of libraries and hidden corners filled with forgotten tales. The scent was a promise of adventure, of stories waiting to be told. The pages were yellowed and brittle, the text in a language she couldn't decipher. The ink had faded over time, but the words still held a certain power. They seemed to dance on the page, inviting her to uncover their meaning. It felt significant, like a secret waiting to be unraveled. Eleanor could sense that this book was special, that it held something important within its pages. She felt a thrill of excitement, knowing that she was about to embark on a journey of discovery. Eleanor knew she had to have it. She clutched the book to her chest, feeling a sense of connection to it. This was more than just an old book. It was a piece of history, a link to the past that she was determined to uncover. As she made her way to the cashier, she couldn't help but wonder what stories awaited her within its pages. Back in her small apartment, Eleanor carefully placed the book on her kitchen table. She made herself tea, the steam curling around her face as she anticipated her find. With a soft cloth, she began to dust the book's cover, her fingers tracing its worn surface. As she worked, she noticed something peculiar. Tucked within the book's spine were several bookmarks, each a different color and texture. Intrigued, Eleanor gently eased one out. It was a strip of faded velvet ribbon, the number 1 stitched onto it in faded gold thread. Her heart quickened. This was more than just an old book. This was a mystery. Eleanor carefully opened the book to the first page marked by the velvet ribbon. The text, still indecipherable, seemed to swirl before her eyes. She moved to the next bookmark, a piece of woven tapestry with the number 2 carefully embroidered on it. Each bookmark was more beautiful, more intricate than the last. As she progressed, a sense of unease began to creep in. The book felt different now, colder. The air in the room seemed to thin, the silence pressing in on her. Eleanor pushed these feelings aside. She had to know what the bookmarks meant. She had to see the message they formed. The 4th bookmark was a lock of hair, braided and tied with a silver thread. It was delicate, almost ethereal, as if it held secrets from a time long forgotten. The braid was meticulously done, each strand woven with care and precision, suggesting it belonged to someone who was cherished deeply. The number 4 was etched onto a tiny silver charm attached to the braid. This small detail seemed to hold significant meaning, a clue, perhaps, to the identity of the person to whom the hair belonged. The charm glinted softly in the light, whispering tales of the past. Eleanor's fingers trembled as she touched it. The sensation of the hair against her skin sent shivers down her spine. It was as if she could feel the emotions, the memories, and the essence of the person it once belonged to. Her mind raced with questions and possibilities. The hair was a rich auburn, vibrant despite its age. Whose hair was it? The color was striking, almost as if it had been preserved through some ancient magic. Eleanor couldn't help but wonder about the life of the person who had once owned this beautiful braid. And what did it have to do with the book? The connection between the hair and the book was a mystery that begged to be solved. Eleanor's curiosity was piqued, but so was her apprehension. She felt like she was on the brink of uncovering something monumental. The next bookmark was a dried sprig of lavender, its fragrance faint but still present. The lavender seemed to carry with it a sense of calm and nostalgia, a stark contrast to the intensity of the braided hair. It was as if the book was guiding her through a journey of emotions. The number 5 was written on a small piece of parchment attached to the stem. This number, like the previous one, seemed to hold a key to the puzzle. What did these numbers signify? Were they dates, ages, or something else entirely? Each bookmark seemed to hold a memory, a story. They were fragments of a larger narrative, pieces of a puzzle that Eleanor was determined to solve. Each item she found within the pages of the book added another layer to the mystery. Eleanor was captivated, but a growing sense of dread coiled in her stomach. The deeper she delved into the book, the more she felt like she was intruding on something sacred, something that was not meant to be disturbed. Her heart pounded with a mix of excitement and fear. She was uncovering something she wasn't meant to see. The book seemed to be revealing secrets that had been hidden for a reason. Eleanor's hands shook as she turned the pages, each one bringing her closer to a truth that could change everything she thought she knew. Section 5, a flickering light. The light in the kitchen flickered, plunging the room into momentary darkness. Eleanor jumped, her heart pounding in her chest. She glanced at the window. A storm was brewing outside, the wind howling like a banshee. The previously comforting silence of her apartment now felt oppressive, filled with unseen eyes. She looked down at the book, at the bookmarks scattered on the table before her. They seemed to pulsate faintly in the dim light, their colors more vivid, their textures more pronounced. Eleanor took a shaky breath. She had to finish this. She had to know what message the book held. Section 6, Growing Dread. The 7th bookmark was a tiny silver locket, the number 7, engraved on its surface. Eleanor's hand shook as she opened it. Inside, she found a miniature portrait of a young woman with haunted eyes and a melancholic smile. The woman in the portrait looked strangely familiar, but Eleanor couldn't place her. The light flickered again, this time dying completely, plunging the room into darkness. Eleanor gasped, her breath catching in her throat. The silence was absolute, broken only by the pounding of her own heart. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her. She was no longer alone in the apartment. Section 7, the final bookmark. In the dimly lit room, shadows danced on the walls, creating an eerie atmosphere. The old book lay on the wooden table, its pages yellowed with age, and a single bookmark peeking out from its depths. Fumbling in the darkness, Eleanor knocked over her teacup. The porcelain shattered as it hit the floor, the sound piercing the silence like a scream in the night. The crash echoed in the silence, but she barely noticed. Her mind was elsewhere, consumed by a sense of urgency and dread. She had to find the last bookmark. It was the key to everything, the final piece of the puzzle that had haunted her for years. With trembling fingers, she located the book and opened it to the final marked page. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing in her ears like a drum. The last bookmark was a plain white ribbon, simple yet significant. It held a weight that was almost tangible, a sense of finality that made her hands shake even more. The number 8 stitched onto it in crimson thread. The air grew heavy, thick with anticipation and fear. The number seemed to glow in the dim light, a beacon in the darkness. The scent of damp earth and decaying flowers filled her nostrils, a reminder of the grave consequences that awaited her if she failed. The room seemed to close in around her, the walls pressing in, suffocating her. Eleanor's eyes darted around the room, searching for any sign of movement, any hint of danger. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps, her fear palpable. She searched the darkness for the source of the smell, the source of her fear. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat, every creak of the floorboards a warning. The source of her fear, she could feel it, a presence lurking just out of sight, watching her, waiting. The air grew colder, the sense of dread more intense. She felt a presence, cold and menacing, standing just behind her. It was as if the darkness itself had come to life, wrapping around her like a shroud. She knew she had to act quickly, or it would be too late. Section 8. A knock at the door. Suddenly, a knock on the door shattered the silence. Eleanor flinched, a scream trapped in her throat. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. Frozen in fear, Eleanor couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The presence behind her moved closer, its cold breath on her neck. The knocking came again, louder now, more desperate. Someone was outside, someone calling for help. Eleanor knew she had to do something, but the fear was paralyzing. The presence tightened its grip, whispering her name in a voice as cold and empty as the grave. Section 9. An unsettling silence. Gathering all her courage, Eleanor pushed back against the unseen force. It resisted for a moment, then vanished, leaving behind the faint scent of decay. Shaking, she stumbled towards the door, her hand reaching for the lock. As she opened the door, a gust of wind slammed it shut again. Eleanor fumbled with the lock, her heart pounding in her chest. Finally, she managed to open the door again. The hallway was empty, there was no one there. Eleanor stepped out, looking up and down the hallway, but there was no sign of anyone. Only an unsettling silence remained.